And we are live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back. Entrepreneur Hour. Today, my special guest is Caitlin Burns. As my show format goes, I like to talk about where we met. We were trying to figure out how we actually met each other.
Yeah.
It was through her husband,
Yeah.
Eric. And then we actually physically met at an event that they put on called
Yeah.
Solaris.
Mhm.
So tell the audience about your origin
Sure.
story, and then we go from there.
Hey, everybody. My name is Caitlin Burns. I got started in theater, actually. I went to school to learn how to make theater, and the school smelled the producer on me from 1,000 miles away. I thought I was an actor, but I'd also been the person who was always going to the taco shop and getting lunch orders so that we could put on a show during the lunch hour. Going to the school board or like the city council to see if we could keep our auditorium open. Like all of this stuff that for me as a young artist who was very into the creative process and had that like aggressive antagonism to all things business and math. It didn't occur to me that what I was doing was entrepreneurial, but it was. And the producer in a theatrical or in a film is really like the CEO of the project. So I made my way into a lucky break where I got to work really, really hard building Storyworlds for major intellectual property franchises. So I got to work on Pirates of the Caribbean, developing the story world into different experiences across about 30 platforms in different countries. And then I worked on it was so fun. It was so fun. And each time you're successful at one of those, it turns into, well, someone else wants to work with you. And it's so fun. No one says no. So, I got to work on Pirates of the Caribbean, Tron Legacy, Avatar, Halo, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
So just so people who may not understand what that means, I'm going to try to break it down and you can go even further. So what that means is, okay, there's a story, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Everybody knows the story, but then there's video games, there's comic books, there's toys, and Caitlin is in charge of figuring out the stories that branch out into all those things, right?
Yes, and then working with the teams that are building those, whether they're here in the United States or in Italy or Asia, to make it make sense, not only for what it is, so that each game is a good game and can stand alone as a game, or each novel is a great novel and can stand alone as a novel. But it's the goal is that the characters are recognizable in everything. They're motivated the same way. They're going to be the same people. Jack Sparrow's not pulling out a laser gun. Unfortunately, that's one of my greatest professional failures. He pulls out a laser gun in one of the young adult novels to fight a dinosaur, and there's no good reason. I'm like, just give me some reason to make this make sense. I lost that one. It hurts to this day. But in practice, like the business rationale was one that Bob Iger brought in when he became CEO of the Walt Disney Company, and had been something that the team that I worked with for about a decade had been piloting with things like Hot Wheels World Race, which was a massive comic book website and then animated series rollout for Mattel. The idea is if the content fits together and is good wherever you find it, people will like it more and it will make more money.
For sure. If it's like something easy attached to because they remember and they're in the brand, it's kind of branding in a way, right?
It is, but it's sort of complex branding where it's not just about making sure that like your bottle is visible the right way. It's about the underlying themes and motivations, because if you're looking at something like the story world for Pirates of the Caribbean, you've got a lot of things that need to match. There are core themes, there are core drivers that make people want to enjoy those stories, that make them want to go deeper. And all of those need to be true wherever you find that content in whatever type of experience it is. And I love talking about Pirates right now because it was the first time I got to work on a theme park project. It was, of course, a movie that was inspired by a theme park ride, But once we actually started building,
I never knew that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So the actual the ride in Disneyland was so popular that they made a whole story around it.
Well, I'll be honest, it was one of those sort of Hail Mary passes that Jerry Bruckheimer and Gore Verbinski and Johnny Depp were coming in with this, like, no one expected Pirates of the Caribbean to be a success the way it was. They hadn't even, like, we're talking about Disney here. They licensed a very small number of consumer products around it because animation had this big expansive view of what to do in the business. And they hadn't bet the same way on the success of the live action franchise. And again, it's a movie about a theme park ride. It's sort of like the Lego movie. Back when it came out, no one expected it to be as good as it was, but it was amazing. The creative vision was there. Yeah. So what was really exciting about Pirates for me was I was inspired by a theme park ride, but it actually led this massive revamp of all of the global Pirates of the Caribbean rides as well. So over the course of a few movies, we built out this massive global story world of pirates. There are 7 seas in the narrative, and it meant that there were these global pirates that had stories that were deep that we could explore. So really cool. Like the Hong Kong Disney attractions are all about sort of these fictionalized versions of actual historical Hong Kong pirates. The same way, when we think about Captain Jack Sparrow or Barbarossa and the Caribbean explicitly, that's what you find in Universal Orlando, but they're lightly fictionalized. Maybe not so lightly, but realistically,
I was gonna say Caribbean, white pirates in the Caribbean. I don't know.
They were. They also, this is my jam. I ran a blog about historical piracy for about 7 years while I was doing this because I couldn't do actual historical pirates. That was my side hustle. Pirates are fascinating entrepreneurs. As we look at the golden age of piracy, like late 1600s, early 1700s, there were a huge number of sort of spare men in the colonies, a combination of like white folks who left indentured servitude, fair number of criminals, but also escaped slaves who were working together to build up these sort of joint companies to run a ship to go and pirate. So
make money however they can.
Captains were democratically elected. So on the ship, the crew elected the captain. They had kind of like a chief of staff who was responsible for like justice and speaking for the crew. But like a pirate ship could go through like 17 captains in a voyage. It was not quite the like we know the big successful pirates because they were the ones who like had longevity. But also each ship had its own articles of rules and order. And some of those rules and order are things we use today. So workman's comp was something that was actually developed on pirate ships in something that's close to what we see today.
Really crazy. Wow.
Yeah. And even things like bicameral legislature, like the way we have 2 houses in our legislature. Some of the like origins of that are the Pirates of Salé in Morocco, where they had
radical people, or what it was.
So like the way our legislative branch is organized here in the U.S. with 2, like a Senate with like old guys and then a House of Representatives, I guess also with old guys. In Salé in Morocco, which was where all the Barbary pirates had one of their main bases, they had a legislature where it was a representative democracy, where one of the houses that was voting on laws and actions were past captains. So they had to be like veterans.
So they had experience. So you like make a decision based on experience. Got it.
And then they had a more open legislative body that was also part of the decision-making process. So bicameral legislature, workman's comp, these are all things that piracy gave us.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So you had to basically study pirate history to be able to create these stories.
Yeah. You can even find it online. Disney actually published, super nerdy. In the 3rd movie, There's the Pirate's Code. Keith Richards walks in, spoilers, but it's been out for more than a decade, walks in with this giant rule book. He walks in with this giant rule book. And that rule book actually exists. They published it as a shorter rule book because it's way too big to publish. But it was based off historical articles from ships. And they were all of these things about how you self-organize, tiny government system and a tiny company system, how you distribute shares, how you organize around workmen's compensation and fair rights within a company. And a lot of it was self-organized. And that was messy and complicated, but absolutely doable. And we see some of the things that were kind of piloted as those business principles on those self-organized ships making their way into the way we look at businesses today.
So Paco is joining us. Paco's a partner of mine on many
Hi,
projects. Paco. We're talking about Caitlin's career and how she worked on Pirates of the Caribbean. Basically, it started out as a ride in Disney, and they made it a movie, and then it's her job to take it and make it a global theme park and story for different. It's called transmedia, right?
So I mean, there are two. Like, the job that I'm most known for is transmedia producer. And you have to explain both sides of that when you explain it. One is producer, which is like the CEO or major business person, administrator, person running the show for a film or TV franchise. And there are like a whole suite of types of producer that sort of are all the business and administrative operations on a film or a television franchise. And I was a board member of the Producers Guild of America for 6 years. So I feel very closely in my heart about crediting for producers and making sure people know what a producer is in an entertainment franchise. But transmedia is like the technique of building a story world across multiple platforms. So how you create characters that are similar, how you organize the themes and make sure they're in every type of experience you can make, but they all fit together without just being adaptations of the same movie script or game into a movie, because they're not the same experience. And you want them to be able to be great games, great movies, great books.
If you interact with a character in a game, there has to be elements that make sense for the game, but also make sense for the overall. So I didn't know that was the term for it until I met you, actually, and you invited me to that conference and we spoke about it, and I never even knew the term, but it made total sense, and it's a very interesting industry. So
that I don't know either.
So anyway, he gave me from Arizona, gave Joe Bob Celestino rather. The small novel or whatever it was, the treatment, and he turned it into a script after he got all the money.
Right.
All the money. And I got a few bucks for making the introduction.
Wonderful.
And I think they have the money, the initial money. So the way they explain it to the script, when you have a script, you try to find somebody who has $10 million in the bank, so that could become your key to getting your 7-8 minutes that you will get with somebody in Hollywood who is an expert on packaging these things or selling them to the studios. The person who took up the $10 million might never have to use it, but you need to have that in there. So that process I kind of understand. I've never gone through it, and one project had gotten the person with the 10 grand, and they were ready to do the second, and then the COVID virus, the virus came in, and everything stopped. Assume for a second that they have a studio and they got the project going. They've done the casting and all that stuff. What is your role? Where do you come in? I'm trying to understand.
But also before you get into that, what he's bringing up is super interesting for anyone that wants to come up with their own story world, right? I think I've heard a lot now that that's what studios are buying now. They're not really buying a movie anymore. They're buying a story world.
Well, there's sort of two, there are a bunch of questions there, and I want to get to all of them with you guys. So, I'm just going to be figuring it out. So the first thing here is it's never been more possible to get a film to audiences. There has never been a time in human history where there have been as many opportunities or ways to distribute a film. Now, the financing of those films is a little bit behind that. So when we're talking about studios, you're really looking at big buyers with established distribution networks, right? And what a studio is giving you is like, you're getting to sell through Walmart, like you're getting to sell through a place with a lot of distribution venues that has all the relationships to get it out fast. But studios right now are either becoming distributors themselves with things like Disney Plus, or they're really competing against Amazon, Netflix, and all of the on-demand and streaming opportunities that are out there. So the financing is lagging a little behind in that. But what I'm seeing more and more is creators that are looking to go around the studio model, in part because Netflix and Amazon have a lot of money to throw at producers right now. That said, getting that meeting is what that packaging price is all about. The same way we're looking at, so I come in as a producer because, the transmedia production stuff I'm best known for, but I actually haven't done as much of in the last few years because I moved on to a few other things. I started a couple businesses. I did some more pro-social work with companies like UNICEF. One of the businesses I founded is in commercial space tourism, which is so fun. But I also do consulting production. And I teach and I educate for people who are looking to build a business around creative projects, whether they're filmmakers or game producers or designers or things of that nature. So when you're looking at what you just talked about, it's a pretty traditional pipeline to sell through a film. Usually you've got an originator of the work who owns the IP, like they wrote a book or it's their life it's about, and then you get the rights to do that, to turn it into a story. So then you have the script. And sometimes if you have the rights to a story and like a news article, that's enough to build the package of talent that will be produced by a studio or a production company and to get that initial funding. So like
when you say a news story, what does that mean? Like
so like a long form article. A lot of long form articles are all people take with them to do that initial pitch. So like the Bling Ring, for example, you may remember that movie from a few years back, or Captain Phillips. Those were all based on long form articles. So just like 2,000 words plus in a publication that told that story, kind of like a treatment, that was like the proof of concept for that film. And with that and Tom Hanks attached, they were able to see the pitch that this is a marketable movie.
The writer didn't make that article. They found that article and they're saying, this is what I want to tell the story based on?
Sometimes. Sometimes the writer of an article will also be a producer.
Okay.
So there's a really fun documentary that I'm very excited about coming out next year called Class Action Park, which is based on journalism by a writer named Seth Porges. And he's a producer on that documentary now because he saw the value in taking what he put on the page and turning it into a documentary. And they put together a trailer, and that's how they're getting the financing and putting it together. They're bootstrapping the actual production, but then looking at recouping that cost in distribution down the road. It depends on the scale of movie you want to make. If you need to have big name A-list celebrities in it, that's why you would go to a packaging agent. So that's usually someone at a talent agency, like a WME, Endeavor, UTA. they would be the people with the relationships to build a team that has like a top tier director or a really hot up and coming director, actors. And that packaging is really just building the pitch, showing, okay, this is the proof of concept. This is what it's about. We've got a screenwriter attached. We've got this talent that's going to bring it to market. And, you know, if you've got Brad Pitt, his name alone will get people into seats. So it's building that data around how marketable it is. And then when you're taking it further, you know, a lot of getting in the door is having those names on it and the relationships that the names bring in. But then it's, you know, the financials. What is the budget? What do you need to make it? Where are you going to make it? What can we work on from there? And that's where the producer expertise really comes in handy, because you're looking at those detailed business plan elements that take it further. For me, I've come in as like a producer on individual platforms where I've made films, I've worked on TV shows, I've got expertise because I've had to work with all sorts of different platforms, or an advisor to build one of those story worlds, which is really what you're looking at when you're looking at a big, massive franchise that can go global, like you know, a Pirates of the Caribbean or an Avatar, a Pacific Rim, you know, something where you're going to be looking to make multiple iterations of it, so multiple movies.
Out of those movies you just mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pacific Rim seems out of the level of Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean. What makes something go that level versus one-off? Is there
business plan?
Before you go, I have to get off because I forgot that I have a Zen Peacemaker board meeting, so the chairman just called me and said, "Where are you?"
Oh no!
I'd love to talk to you again. Maybe there was a phone.
Definitely.
And maybe my thought is that maybe you and I and Bob Celestino get on the phone and see how there is a connection, because I think he has content. He has what I think are scripts, but everybody says that, as you know. You know, but I read them. I read them, and two of them I was into him. You know, maybe 10 to 20 minutes. I said, I'm not reading anymore. You know, if you don't grab me immediately, I'm done. You know.
Yeah.
But maybe we could do that at some point with your
Yeah. And for any of you viewing at home, if you have an idea that you want feedback on, reach out to me on Twitter. It's my name at Caitlin_Burns, which is here. And I'm sure Miguel will put it in the comments as well.
Right? Yeah.
Where do you reside? In New York?
I'm in New York.
That's great. Thank you. Good meeting you.
Thanks. Great to meet you too.
All right, Paco, we'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.
But the idea of like one of these big story worlds is it's something that you can build into a lot of different lines of business, where you've got like a driving line of business, like say a sequence of feature films. Like, you know, for Pacific Rim, the investment in those movies was huge, but the sort of downstream possibility to make more of them is also really high. But you know,
that was part of the business plan from day one with Pacific Rim. Okay.
Yeah. It's like, if you think about, you know, looking at the choices movie studios are making, they're not always successfully looking at making a sequence of films, but the upshot of making a long-term investment in like an evergreen franchise, something that can continue indefinitely, like Fast and Furious, very much proven that it can make movies forever and spin-off movies forever.
I actually came across a problem that I see now that we're all Netflixing and living, right? Is most shows end super abruptly because they get canceled, right? So like, what if there was a way to make sure shows don't do that? I don't know, because now with the culture of how we watch TV, kind of like good shows get chopped off and you're like, oh, that's never coming back. Awesome.
I know.
Two days of my time to it, you know.
Well, a lot of that comes like my absolute favorite show right now is The Expanse, and some of that comes down to like the rights. You know, some of like the core agreement at the beginning of when a group decides to make a show with another group. So Sci-Fi, the channel that initially commissioned The Expanse, didn't have significant ownership stake in the long-term success. So because they didn't own the intellectual property, they were laying out cost, and the returns they were getting were off advertising.
And
so
not enough.
So if you are taking that as the IP owner and then re-airing it on streaming, and the channel doesn't have a financial incentive to keep building seasons, you're out of luck. So Sci-Fi didn't renew its option to air it, and its option to participate. Sorry.
Did Amazon buy it? Because the only reason I know about expansion is because I've seen it on Amazon. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, what happened there is like you have a partnership with the network. They're paying some of the costs of production. They're airing it. They have exclusive rights to air it, at least on on-air platforms, and to rebroadcast on on-air platforms. But the showrunners owned the IP and had the control to take it elsewhere. So with The Expanse, The Expanse was actually the first novel released on Kindle. When Jeff Bezos held up the Kindle, The Expanse was what he was showing on it. So this was all going down when I was working full time at the commercial space tourism company, Space Nation, out of Helsinki.
Very nice.
The team behind the show, which was doing a panel at Space, the big commercial space conference, and they were backstage with Jeff Bezos, and the cast basically cornered him and was like, "Hey, purchase The Expanse."
Power sell.
And the rumor is that he went out on stage and was like, "I'm buying The Expanse," before telling anyone at Amazon it was happening. They just cornered him backstage. He made the decision, went out, and was like, "I'm saving The Expanse," and everyone cheered, and the world loved him, and all of the fans came together in happiness and joy and sang praises. But for a streaming network like that, if they're making an investment, one, they might make a different deal with those producers to take a piece, but also they don't have the same business model that a broadcaster does that's funded by advertising. So if you're not selling advertising onto a show on the air, then it stops becoming viable as a business proposition for your network distributor, right? Kind of makes sense. So when we're thinking about
even the way you make it is different, right? Because you got to make it for commercial breaks when you don't have to do that on Amazon, right?
Absolutely. And that's something that actually becomes really entertaining to me when I look at sort of the work I'm doing right now with Future Colossal. I'm sort of coming back with a lot of the things that I've worked on before, but I'm getting my hands more directly in production with this team. I've done a lot of work as a producer on it, but we're building. All right, Future Colossal is an experiential design lab, which means we're making experiences across all platforms, but a lot of it is for theme parks. So full twisting, like decades future-proof, top-tier technology, very high traffic, big crowd, physical experience environments.
Online.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting conversation to have too, because a lot of that is shifting, but we've always worked with touchless technologies and thinking about that in general. So that's something where we're actually in pretty good shape. But also, for example, last year we made a game for Stranger Things for Netflix. And when you're thinking about
for a theme park? For a theme park?
No, for just the release of the third season, which was released on the Microsoft Store. It was up as part of the Camp Nowhere campaign that ran from the beginning of summer last year through November. And it was a game that was inspired by the year where season 3 comes out. So Microsoft's first Windows operating system came out. We emulated it and took it over with a bunch of nostalgic games and Easter eggs. And because it was a streaming series, we saw, at initial release and promotion, big uptick in participants, but then the sort of plateau that you would expect for a licensed game was higher because people are discovering it all the time. The show doesn't have the same sort of on-air sequence. So for a binging series, what's really important is that the narrative is good and that it's still available.
Always.
Oddly enough, the show the game was pirated So we still see daily active users, even though it's not available on the Microsoft Store. And people are playing it through and completing it. So
they kept the
really
same tracking. So they still kept the same analytics. That's great.
Pirates.
That's
well, I mean, we built it with really strong analytics in mind. But
nice.
this sort of the thing that I love about this team is we're not just building one type of project. We're able to build creative projects that meet the needs of our clients. And some of that is marketing, experiential marketing, or specific line of business extensions like games that can also provide revenue. And some of it are whole products. So we have incubated firms that have spun out around particular projects we built with that same sort of idea in mind. Because when you're making a new experience, it's a whole new line of business, potentially, where you can have revenue or you can have marketing eyes. And sort of the business goals are something that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about why you're making any of those investments in a story world or in a marketing campaign. Like, what is the goal? And is there a long tail? And are there any opportunities that we haven't added into that?
So this makes me think of, I'm listening to this book right now called Subscribed, and it's basically talking about the subscription model and how it's going to change business, right? And one of the examples in the chapters is stories and games, like that, to get people in earlier, have them subscribe to the game and help be development and keep it going and keep adjusting it, changing it. But the subscription is to the team building the story in the game. Continue to do it.
One really interesting example of that is a group called Serial Box, SERIAL Box, and they have basically created subscription chapters of novels. So building off some user behaviors that you can see from big social platforms like Wattpad, where authors are publishing content weekly, like a chapter a week, and they're getting hundreds of thousands of readers tuning in every week to read their new chapters. Serial Box is using a sort of writer's room model where they have multiple authors all working on these story worlds that are publishing novels by weekly chapter. They put out a few a month and have been running for a few years, but they've built enough of a subscriber base that within the first 12 months, they'd already started receiving offers to license some of their titles to film.
So,
and currently they're
using something like Patreon. Like, how are they doing?
They're a subscription app.
They have their own.
So they're a direct app, and then once they have the sort of book volumes complete, they publish because it's a full novel. So you get another line of business on the tail end. And now they're even doing things like licensing those same sort of written stories for shows like Orphan Black, which are off the air but still have really active fan bases. And there's no reason why there can't be new content in that story world. It might take place earlier, it might follow different characters, but the world is big enough and interesting enough that it can support more and different perspectives in that space.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like I remember learning about certain shows that had like rabid fan bases that I didn't even know. Like there's one with like these two brothers that they are like devil. I forgot. It's on
Supernatural.
Yes, they have like conferences and everything for this thing, and it like been on for like ridiculous amount of time. But you don't know that, and they're just on Channel 11, so you just don't think. To me, I never even watched Channel 11, but and they're going for years and years and years, have fan bases, make money, and then it's so like, ideas like that. If they can subscribe to them and keep them going, maybe not the same two brothers, but keep it going. If they have the fan base.
Or it could be the same two characters in a different era or in a different storyline that fits within those. I think what's really compelling to me is a fan base is basically a known addressable market, right? So you have this group of people who are very likely to purchase, right? Now, you may need a much larger addressable market to validate the investment in a $500 million
Yeah,
film.
exactly.
But to justify a smaller expense where you're testing and learning on a smaller platform with a book or a game, like having that data.
Yeah. It reminds you of technology, right? You get traction. That's your traction. Say, look, I have this many people interested, invest in this, or ask them to invest in it, right? It's kind of like,
yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of the things that we look at with our clients at Future Colossal as well. Like, what is the budget you have? What is the market you want to reach? And how can we optimize for that? But it's the same sort of principle that I had to look at for major studios when I was working with them, because even Avatar had a budget. You know, it cost $500 million to make that movie. And sure, they recouped.
Yeah,
I'm so excited about the new ones.
Oh, me too.
More on that offline. But you know, and Lightstorm recouped because they were able to license some of the technology they developed into medical.
AR, they did like AR shot. Yeah.
Moved like massive leap ahead in production technology and visualization tech. So yeah, there are reasons why it took that long and that much. But the marketing budget for that existed, you know, and for the team that was taking that to market, every time you're looking at making an extension, you're fine-tooth combing that as diligently as if you're a startup where your budgets are really lean. Because especially for something new, like Avatar was at the time, you know, you're looking at it as what can I afford to spend to learn what I need to learn?
Yep. And
to be able to figure out what succeeds and what fails. So you're testing and learning all the time, but also each one of those bets requires a really strong data validated hypothesis. So knowing that an audience exists suddenly takes a lot of, like, it really gives you a strong given in the math you need to determine, is this a budget I could spend? Or is this something worth investing in?
It de-risks the investment, right? Because there's a certain amount of buy-in already, so it's less risk, right? Well, if you create some wild thing and there's very little audience, who knows what happens.
And the idea of a franchise and all of these sort of transmedia licensing plays is very much about spreading out that risk. So you can see like that there's creating a really strong story world. There's creating a long, sustainable business plan around it. But then when you're looking at all of these licensed or expanded parts of the universe, you're also looking at a lot of opportunities to learn if this story is really speaking to audiences, if this character who isn't getting screen time is really appealing. And we saw that in things where a lot of characters who weren't actively getting screen time were able to, say, host their own video series. Like for Dexter, Vince Masuka, a character who was Asian American and also much beloved, but very much a lower tier character, had a really wildly successful web series that was interstitial to the episodes when they came out. So it was like his vlog, he was perfect for the internet, a perfect like vlogger character. It made sense for the character, but he would even like answer audience questions. It was a very active and interesting way to bring more of that to life. And in like Europe, yeah.
No, go ahead, finish.
Yeah. But it was also like a way for networks to also test the viability of different character perspectives, often leading to more representation of more diverse characters. So Masuka, being Asian American screen time in film and television is tiny when you look at it compared to white or even African American or Hispanic American or characters. Like the opportunities for airtime comparatively very small, but when you are starting to see big audiences tuning in for these characters, it's much harder to make the argument that which existed at the time, that people wouldn't tune in for diverse characters, which is so wrong-headed that it makes me actively angry all the time, and did then too. But we had to figure out how to push those needles in ways that were going to be data-backed the same way.
That's super interesting. So how do you see, as you're working on theme park stuff, you're working on media or whatever the new term is, you got to tell me what how does post-COVID affect this? Like what the theme park, for instance, right? Those lines. Mm-hmm. Now if you got to be 6 feet away from each other, the line's going to be way longer. How do you see how do you see all this going?
So one of the virtues of sort of working in experimental and new technologies is it makes you pretty adaptable. So looking at it, like we have a new set of givens around how we design these things. For theme parks, it's about social distancing. It's also about looking at touchless technologies like gestural interfaces, which were already being rolled out. It's looking at connected interfaces like RFID bands and how those can add customization, but also access. So you're not touching as many objects, right? It's thinking about technologies in a slightly different way to start. And the parts that we're working on are already, they're, the one we're working on actively has set its open date. It was in development and it's set its open date. So, we've been fortunate in that, even historic recessions, which didn't include closures, parks that were investing in new developments and new attractions were able to weather the storm a lot more than ones that weren't reinvesting, that weren't already doing the work to look at how we would bring in audiences again. What would be worth it for an audience to come back and either spend that money and now potentially, put themselves into a situation where there's higher risk in what is the reward that's worth that. So making sure that the experiences are great, exciting, wonderful. And for our partners, at least, I know that that's the case.
Sure.
At the same time, for the rest of the sort of work that I do, there are definitely areas where there are more opportunities rather than less right now for streaming, games. Across the board, financing has gotten harder for new work in the past 3 months. But looking ahead, things like esports, games, film and television, once production ramps up, but animation is doing great right now. These are all areas where people still very much want this content. People are still looking for ways to connect to it and to one another. And for me, one of the ways that, was really important to me growing up and as a grown up, is I connect with people over the stories that we experience together. The things that I love, like The Expanse, which you should watch. I'm going to check in with you. Definitely check it out. I'm excited about it. It gives us ways to connect that we didn't have before. Sure. And, seeing the growth of fandoms, people are genuinely building their communities with these stories as center points. So for shows and films and marketing campaigns and advertisers and brands to provide opportunities for people to connect with one another and to find really wonderful, engaging ways to spend some of their time, like that's the name of the game, and it always has been. But it's even more important now where people are more separated, where we're trying to figure out the new ways to play together. And I love the entertainment industry, and I really like the advertising industry because it gives us an opportunity to experiment. All of these experiential tools that we use all the time now, a lot of them got their sort of audience-based test bed out of the entertainment industry. So if we look at
now, there's data that help decisions, right?
Yeah, like we can see because we're playing. People are inclined to play in things that they see as playful. So if it's a show and you're playing in a show or playing with an advertisement, the pressure is totally off. So if you're a startup and you need to play test, it's sort of finding a way to engage people to get them excited about it is hard. If you have a beloved story with great characters, getting people to play with those characters or with that story is a no-brainer. Giving them more opportunity to explore, more opportunity to engage, they do it. You have to make something worth playing, but they'll do it. It's already there because people love stories, they love playing, they love connecting with one another in it. So it reduces some of that, overhead of having to invite people in. But beyond that, for us, we're looking. that we have people coming to us every day who want to build ideas out that are either marketing, promotion, products, or creative installations or licensed products like games, experiences, and so on. But we've got the flexibility as a team to explore any of those directions: software, hardware, narrative, creative, permanent, semi-permanent, outdoor, indoor. In-home experiential design is really exciting right now.
Oh wow, what's that even mean?
So people are the big buzzword was experience economy when we were talking about what was being built for promotion and marketing and advertising, but also like what was the coming thing for audiences, like creating these events, creating these marquee reasons for people to spend their money or get out of the house. And that has not changed just because people are separated from one another. The experience economy is still real, but those experiences have to be crafted with social distancing in mind, with being able to connect people more remotely, with using technology tools that are building those connections between people more seriously. And it's a change in the way we design that experience. But the reason why it's critical, an opportunity for people to connect with something that's genuinely exciting, that also lets them connect to one another, that's still very, very real as a motivator, both socially and culturally, and business KPI goals. All of that is still very true. So when we're thinking about at-home experiential, it's what are the things that are going to bring that event level excitement into people's homes? What is it that we can do that's going to maybe connect a lower attendance event or a more exclusive opportunity to engage with a much wider audience at the same time? And what can we build that a lot of people can enjoy that is also going to give that opportunity for people to connect with one another and be part of something bigger than their living room?
So one way I like to end the show, we got 8 minutes left. What are you looking for? What could help you either individually or through future Colossal that maybe somebody watching can connect with you for?
Sure. I am always looking for new partners and collaborators. I'm always looking for new, weird challenges for us to take on. So if you have a idea that your team wants to build, or a project that you want to pursue, or you need to be able to market and connect with audiences, give me a call. My team's door is always open to estimate things, to validate whether it's technically possible. And there's nothing I enjoy more than figuring out how to solve a weird challenge. I've been looking for years for a team of folks that I can throw whatever weird experiential challenge comes my way at, and then they tell me exactly what we would need to do to build it and how much it would cost and what the timeline is. And I have yet to throw anything at this team that they couldn't do that for.
That's awesome.
And that doesn't always mean that it fits within budget, but we also know what I've also loved seeing what people are bringing me back on this team, where, okay, we know the budget and we know the goals, and this idea may not be possible with the technology we have now, but we can do it with these technologies, or we could do this other idea that would hit some of the same points and would fit within that budget range. So, I love weird ideas. I love the challenge.
I have a connection for you. I'll send you the link. But Renee, I interviewed Renee last Friday. He has a cool technology, and he's working on some rides, some I guess, like ride attractions, and
wonderful,
the connection there.
Sure.
So I'll send you the video, and then we can connect. I'll connect you to Paco too, of course.
The best gift that you can ever give me personally, you and also the viewing public, is an introduction to someone interesting. I just love meeting new people. I'm curious, let's say curious and not nosy. But I love learning what people are thinking of, what their creative passions are. It's what gets me out of the bed in the morning. Finding stories and ideas that, you know, are pushing me in different ways. And I just love seeing what people come up with and helping bring it to life.
Awesome. So anybody watching, definitely the way you get in contact with Caitlin is Twitter. I got the at there. And LinkedIn. I have your LinkedIn on the description.
Absolutely.
I'll put Future Colossal there as well. So yeah, thank you for taking the time. I know you know, everybody's crazy right now. New York just reopened, so I'm not sure if you're still in quarantine mode. I am, but I think we're in an interesting time for experiential. I definitely want to keep in touch with you about how it's going as stuff starts to open back up.
Well, I'm always happy to come back on and tackle new challenges.
So George, Urban Hebado, which he was on my show too. I'll send you him too. He's interested in you. So we'll set that up too. Thanks for watching, George. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Caitlin, for coming on. Tell Eric I said what's up, and let's keep it going.
Will do.
Talking. All right. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.